call to order the April 13th, 2016 meeting of the Southborough School Committee. First item, as always, audience sharing. We have some audience, at least.
Yeah, we have an audience.
Apparently we'll share later. All right, on to new business. We have town meeting recap. It's over.
It's over.
Crazy, but over.
Successful evening, I think.
Yes.
Pleased that the school community and the Southborough community supported our budgets. We worked long and hard to produce budgets that were educationally sound and fiscally responsible, and in that is a tremendous amount of collaboration with all of our administrators and teachers and certainly the school committee, and the number of times we've spoken about the budget since September, and also with our town and town boards. So we're really appreciative that everyone believed in our budgets and supported them. I think it was, I didn't turn around, but I think it was pretty much unanimously. So really pleased with that.
I mean,
I do
held it. So, right.
I do want to send a nod out to the Trottier team. Audio, video malfunctioning after the first night with a full audience, and I think Jamie Clark did an amazing job trying to get us through those difficult few minutes before we adjourned for the evening. And I know today Dave White and the Trottier team, with Keith and Cheryl and everyone trying to address that pretty quickly, working with the town, and yesterday, and it was successful. So above and beyond the call of expectations.
So you end up bringing in a temporary system.
I did have one advisory member come up to me after the meeting and say that they were pretty impressed with the fact that we said, just wait till town meeting and we'll impress you with our new sound system.
He did.
Up for interpretation by the press, right?
Exactly.
That's right.
Well, hopefully it's under. We'll get it fixed. An old long warranty. There you go. I know we were getting confused because we were like, no, it is in the budget. I'm like, no, it's the lighting's in the budget. We just did the speaker system. So, oh well, it all worked out in the end. But yes, thank you for the hard work getting us up and going on Tuesday with the portable system and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, not expected, but appreciated by the town, I think. So.
I love the historical commissioner was like, thank you very much to the man in the booth.
Or the woman, she showed up with a bullhorn for the second night. Oh, I didn't see that. Oh, you missed that. Yeah, as a joke. She's like, I brought this just in case. So, perfect. So yeah, no, I think it was great. I think people, it was obvious people supported the budget and appreciated the work, and so.
Yeah, I was going to say, all in all, I think it was just a good night for us. It's a couple, several years now with really no big. That's right. So, I think we appreciate that the voters in the town do support us, and it was a good night.
Wow.
I think that's a good point to make, that there was no hold. I mean, that means nobody even had a question. So I think that does speak to the process working with the town through these many months. And
it's a very collaborative process
exactly.
these days. So.
I just always get a little nervous when the moderator takes a little bit longer and
does
a
on
deeper
this.
breath after the outline, and before he moves on to ask that. I thought last year. Yeah,
And I think it's always because it is written sort of funny that he's always trying to figure it out. But you're right, there is an extra long amount of time.
It appears like it's eternity. I know it's not. It's just a mere few seconds, but it's always that. Okay, let's move on now. So it was a good night. It was a great night.
I think we also benefited a bit from that unknown, which you really can't control, which is the mood of the hall. I mean, I think there were only 2 plus 1 afterwards, budgets held out of the entire budget.
Right.
So there was really just I think, kind of a mood that said, we're comfortable, let's move on.
Right. Full house too. 500, 450 to 500 folks coming out.
we were definitely not the star attraction.
You never want to.
No, and I don't think you never are, actually. I agree with Roger.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
All in all, it was a town meeting.
Absolutely. All right, approval of 2016-17 school committee meeting dates.
And it's not even one night later, 2 nights later, do we take a look at our school committee meeting dates for next year. And there's no need to approve them tonight, but you're certainly welcome to do so. If you'd like to check your calendars, we have a little bit of time before these dates need to be published and shared in final form. For Southborough, I think there's one date that customarily shifts, and this year it's in October, so that must mean we have the 12th off, or the 13th is an event that we celebrate on our school calendar. And then we have, I think, just the usual progression of dates, second Wednesday of the month for the most part. And our 4 combined meetings as well.
What did you say about the October date? The second thing you said, we either have the 12th off or we celebrate something?
I think the 12th might be one of our
I think it's Yom Kippur.
holidays. I think it's Yom Kippur.
Okay.
And so that's why we're looking at Thursday.
Right, okay.
So do we want to approve these tonight, or?
Well, the only issue about approving them tonight is there's regional combined on here too,
Yeah.
in Northborough,
Yeah.
but,
No, we usually
yeah,
approve them at a combined.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, no time like the present to start marking our calendars off for next year.
All right.
At least we know what we're doing almost every Wednesday night. That's good.
All right, curriculum update, mathematics. So we have company.
We have great company. We are in great company this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Greg Martineau to lead us through the presentation before our stellar teachers approach and share with us what they've been up to in terms of the curriculum in mathematics.
Sure, and if I could ask just for a second to set up and take your chair for some of my special guests.
Absolutely, absolutely. Infinitely.
I'll take that. Sure.
Greg, come on, lights. Hello, lights. Yeah. Carry ahead and look.
So good evening, and this evening we're excited to present a mathematics curriculum update, K-8. And with me this evening are 3 very important people. We have Mrs. Lisa Goulet, who teaches 2nd grade at Woodward School, Ms. Kelly Farrow, who works at Neary School, who teaches 4th grade, and Mr. Tom Griffin, who works at the middle school, primarily teaches 7th and 8th grade mathematics. In addition to their important roles as educators, they also serve as curriculum leaders in areas of mathematics. And as you can see on the slide, they're part of a larger team, the One Community of Learners philosophy. They also work with their Northborough counterparts, as well as Mrs. Diane DeSantis, who is the department chair at the high school. So this represents the collaborative work between Northborough, Southborough, and the regional district. And this team provides leadership in terms of curriculum articulation, as well as reviewing resources and materials and providing building-based professional development, and also supporting the leadership team, which consists of building principals. So this evening we have a few goals. I'm going to provide you with an overview of the mathematics curriculum work that has been accomplished, communicate each school's story and where we are as a district, share a little bit about the mathematics professional development opportunities that educators are engaged in, communicate next steps, and answer questions. And at this time, I'm going to talk a little bit about mathematics instruction in the changing landscape. This body of work is really a culmination of work that's been taking place over the past several years. And it really began with when the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education shifted their math curriculum frameworks. And it provided us with an opportunity to really ask 3 central questions. What's working well in terms of our math curriculum? what resources are we using, and are we aligned to the new frameworks. This work began in 2011, and as a result of that work, two major outcomes came forth, and that was really looking at more aligned curriculum resources that are consistent across our K-8 schools, as well as really thinking about what types of professional learning opportunities our teachers need in order to be excellent math teachers. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Lisa, who will share some of the work that has happened at Finn and Woodward School.
Okay, so there are two professional learning communities that we have at Finn and Woodward. One of them is grade level. Each grade level has a designated meeting time each week. And although we cover everything, it definitely is a time where we discuss mathematics. Teachers have an opportunity to connect on the topics of study. We have conversations about the planning and the pacing so that we can stay together as a grade level. It provides us with the time to plan collaboratively and talk about ways to meet learners of all needs. We also, this year, Jim has started a PLC for pre-K to third grade teachers, and each teacher attends one of them. They're all subject areas, and then behavior, and the specialists. So for our math PLC this year, we really had some big conversations about Envision and the alignment pre-K all the way to third grade and how it vertically aligns, what's happening in each of our classrooms, data collection, some of our assessments, how we communicate with parents, and just kind of the structure of our math blocks. It was an opportunity for teachers to explore that vertical alignment and truly have conversations, which, you know, is hard to have being in two different buildings. As far as our math resources, Envision is really what anchors us. This is our third year implementing it. It's definitely not the be-all, end-all for everything, but it's a resource that aligns directly to the frameworks. And it gives us each kind of a starting point. In addition to using Envision, we also have some online resources that we use. Envision has their own program, Pearson SuccessNet, and then we supplement with IXL. IXL is an online resource that provides an endless amount of student practice questions that are all tied to the frameworks. In addition, there's Everyday Counts Calendar Math. And again, this is consistent K to 3. It provides us opportunities for math practice and discussion while incorporating daily calendar exploration. Being proficient in math fact fluency is important for all math students. So beginning in second grade, all students have daily math fact practice with the Mastering Math Facts program. It's individualized for each student, and kids progress as appropriate for them. In addition, teachers have lots of activities, games, and resources to help their students be successful. I wanted to share with you a little bit about the structure of our math blocks. Each classroom has approximately an hour each day, you know, depending on a schedule. Some teachers have a little bit less on one day and maybe more on another. A math block typically begins with a problem-based interactive learning exploration activity, and this is part of the Envision program. It gives students a story problem, and they have to find a way to solve it. Students often work with a partner, or they work in a small group, and they have the use of manipulatives, such as base 10 blocks, or place value charts, or shapes, to solve a problem. There's really little instruction that starts before that, so the kids really are exploring and trying to creatively come up with a way to solve the problem. After solving the problem, students have an opportunity to share their method with their peers. That math conversation is the springboard for the lesson of the day. Once the lesson is taught, teachers are able to provide both guided and independent practice for students. As teachers observe students working, they're able to plan their instruction for future lessons and decide the best way to differentiate. The photos used in this presentation show many of the different activities that teachers use to engage students in math. If you walk into a classroom at Finn or Woodward, you'd find the students engaged in independent practice. Some of them are working with a teacher. Some may be playing a math concept game, either teacher developed or purchased. Others are utilizing online resources. It could be on the iPad using a math fact game or IXL. But most importantly, there's lots and lots of math conversations. I actually just went around to all of the classrooms and literally walked up and down the hall, didn't tell anybody I was coming, and knocked on their doors, and if they were doing math, I said, can I take some pictures? And it was so impressive to me just what everybody was doing, and just even, in kindergarten, listening to those kids talk about math. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot about this. We wanted to provide you guys with some examples of what the problem-based interactive learning kind of looks like for the kids. So this is a second grade problem, and it's just a simple addition problem to us, but when this problem is posed for the students, they have not learned how to regroup. So they can't just stack up the numbers and add. So just some of the ways that a student might solve this problem is they might have an open number line, they might go over to the math shelf and grab base 10 blocks, they might use mental math and break apart the 10s or the 1s, they might draw a picture, and then of course there are some students who know how to regroup already, and there they are, they stack their numbers and regroup and solve. But it's really, I don't tell them, no teacher tells them how to solve. They have that exploration time where they're really just trying to figure out the problem.
Going to make them solve it.
Anything to do that. Yours, maybe not.
We're a little scared.
I picked an easy one for me.
So similar to a lot of the things that you heard Lisa talk about, you're going to see a common thread following up at Near East. So one of the first things that we do is each week we meet as a grade level, and that's our professional learning community. We kind of cycle through a variety of topics, whether it's math or writing, technology. But at the beginning of the year, because Envisions was a new program for us, this is Neary's first year using this math program, we definitely focused more on math at the beginning of the year so teachers could become more comfortable with the program. During the PLC time, we also have our technology specialist join us several times, and she will talk about different ways to use either the Envision program online or just how we can integrate the iPads during our math blocks. Like I mentioned, this is our first year using Envision as kind of our primary resource, and we've had several professional development opportunities provided to us by Kathleen with professionals from Envision who've come in and trained us both on the online components, which we found to be really helpful, and just kind of getting the program up and running as far as the structure of the lessons. In addition to using the Envision program, we also have a lot of online resources like Lisa had mentioned. We'll access IXL. A lot of teachers are using Extra Math as a way to practice math facts. We also, a lot of teachers have been using the Pearson SuccessNet tools. Again, just becoming familiar with them and trying to see how they're best used in our classrooms. The tools, the Pearson SuccessNet tools, allow us to assign students work right through either the SuccessNet or through Google Drive. So if a student gets homework, it might be available online through their Google Drive, or some videos are available through there too. It also allows us to assign online assignments or assessments where the kids can go online towards the end of a unit, take this review assessment, and it will collect the data for us and show us which problems students struggled with, and we can look at it kind of as a class to see if there's anything we need to reteach, or individuals to meet with, either individuals or small groups. Like Lisa mentioned, our math block is going to look pretty similar as far as the structure, starting with a problem-based interactive learning. same type of thing. We'll give them a problem and they'll work with a partner or in a small group to kind of work through that and have a conversation about it. We'll always come back as a group to discuss that. 'Cause like Lisa mentioned, the biggest thing is having a conversation and hearing how other students solve the problem, because what may work for you might not work for someone else, and you might learn something just by having that quick conversation. It's always followed up with some guided and independent practice, so teachers guiding you through a new skill or a new component to that, and then students are always given time to do some independent practice with teacher support as needed. One of the great things is that the work is definitely differentiated with this program. It really kind of allows for individualization as best you can. Thank you. And here's an example of a problem-based interactive learning from a 5th grade text. This is before they've learned order of operations, and it's a great example because I actually talked to the kids when we did this about, you see this online a lot, you know, can you solve this problem? And how even adults can make the mistake and not follow order of operations. And they always get such a great kick out of that, even grown-ups don't necessarily know how to do this. But again, you can see it's not necessarily just finding the correct answer, it's about why. It's kind of evaluating mistakes, and I know Tom will talk about it in a little bit about the math practices. This kind of ties right in with that.
So kind of the same structure in terms of the presentation. Troutier has had what I would call a professional learning community for years, and it's really in the form of department meetings. As a department, we have met regularly, at least once a week, for many, many years. Unfortunately, we don't have quite as much time to meet as departments in terms of its regularity, but our time that we are allotted to meet is longer on any given period. So what normally happens in those meetings, despite the regular rigmarole that we have to get through in terms of just curriculum, we really try to focus on connection of concepts grades 6 through 8. So what fractions look like, how they're taught in grade 6, grade 7, grade 8, how decimals are taught, as well as really aligning our curriculum to make sure that we hit every single topic, because one of the I think wonderful things that we offer here at Troutier is the ability for students to take a formalized algebra course, which is not actually the prescribed curriculum as defined by the Massachusetts framework. The typical middle school is a 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade curriculum, and algebra is kind of a step above. So one thing that we really try to focus on is, how can we get as many of those kids up to that higher level that we can, and that's really based on the conversations that we have in the departments. Now, as well, we really focus on the students that are struggling and why they might be struggling, but I'll speak to that, in a little bit. The structure of math instruction is actually quite similar to what you would see at the elementary level. Maybe not quite as much in terms of actual manipulatives that they're using, but all of our lessons do have some sort of an exploration component, as well as some sort of a formalization lesson component as well. Much like what Kelly said, when we're doing the activities and explorations, most of the students don't really have experience with what we're doing, okay? So what we use is what's called a record and practice journal, which is basically a booklet that every single student gets. So grades 6 to 8, they all get a paperback booklet that has all these activities and explorations that tie directly with the lessons that we would be teaching them. The thing that I really like about that is, again, echoing what my counterpart said, is that it's really heavy on a math discussion, and it really, really pushes the kids to prove to not only themselves but to their peers why they believe what they believe. And that is something that I think we all could agree is pretty difficult in the area of mathematics. Every single lesson is going to be very overt for the students to know what math practice standard that they are focusing on. Sometimes lessons have more than one math practice standard. But you can just ask any of my students that they're up on my wall and I'm pointing to them all the time. And again, I'll speak to that more in a little bit. But they're really just what you and I would call habits of mind of a good mathematics student, and really what it takes to be successful in the area of mathematics. So after we've had that exploration, we then generalize our understandings, right? So we all have a discussion about what we think we know, whether or not we truly know it, and how we can make that actual math generalization to a rule or a skill or whatever. Then we obviously give them application of that. We try as hard as we can to give them real-world connections. That's okay. It's just like
That's
teaching
why they
an
brought you
eighth
along.
grade. Listen, this happens. Trust me, if I'm in charge of the technology, this happens on a regular basis, so don't worry about that. So, we look at giving them real-world applications. Again, my kids will tell you sometimes they can be contrived, which I agree with. But getting them to understand that the mathematics isn't just happening in those four walls, that there is an actual application of this stuff, even if it is as simple as being a logical and analytical thinker. In terms of the math resources, we use the Big Ideas program, again, as the anchor, which is the brother or sister program, if you will, to Envision. So again, restating, every student gets an actual textbook, and it is progressive through 6th through 8th grade. So they would see the same exact kind of presentations in each book. Each student gets a record and practice journal, which thankfully is theirs to keep, so they can actually keep all those resources. So at a later date, if they're like, I forget how to graph an exponential function, they can go back and they get to review that. One of the pieces that I really like about the program is what are called performance tasks. So these, to be honest with you, are not contrived at all. They are actual real-world scenarios where the kids need to not only imply, but interpret and give explanations as to why they solved and how they solved what they did. And that's the thing that I have found is what kids really struggle with. They very rarely struggle with the computation. They're like, yep, blah, 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 the answer's 12. Okay, why is the answer 12? And they say, well, because the math says it's 12. Obviously, that's not a valid response. So getting them to really train themselves to think about why they did what they did and working on that communication piece really comes to the forefront when we're talking about performance tasks. The other kind of extension to that is Big Ideas offers STEM videos, which are directly connected to those performance tasks. So we might show them a 2-minute video on tornadoes, and then they would do some sort of a performance task based on the connection to that video and the math that they're learning. There's a myriad of online resources. I'm not going to even attempt to list all of them because 6th grade teachers use ones that are different from 7th grade teachers and 8th grade teachers. But the one common thread is the online resources offered by Big Ideas. So this year we were able to finally start to implement assigning each student a login and a password so that they could access what I call the bells and whistles of the online resources. So first understand that anyone, regardless of whether or not you have purchased the Big Ideas program, can take part in online resources, meaning that the book is available online. They will not have all of the other additional resources that come with a student login. So again, what Kelly said, there's online tutorials, there's connections to like YouTube videos and things like that, that regardless of the fact that they teach it exactly the same way I teach it, kids are like, oh, that made perfect sense when I watched the video. And there's online quizzes that they can take that kind of modify. So if like the quiz noticed that the kid is getting this cohort of questions wrong, they're going to focus more on those as opposed to just repeating the same ones over and over and over again that they've already been successful with. So that just in itself to me is an incredible resource. Again, as I said, we have all levels of students that we need to consider, So there's a whole bunch of intervention activities as well for students that are struggling in the area of mathematics. Whether that be a workbook, a digital resource, an online resource, again, the opportunities are pretty endless. And finally, this is just because I'm currently taking retail, I'm sure you guys all know that. It has a whole bunch of ELL resources, which I think are actually quite good, so that you can get kind of a connection. Most people are like, oh yeah, I understand why ELL is important in language arts and social studies. It is actually equally, sometimes if not more important in mathematics, because the language of mathematics is becoming so important. I'm sure Keith would agree with me that years ago, we really didn't focus so much on having them use correct vocabulary. As long as they understood, for instance, I'm talking about the top number or the bottom number in that fraction thingy, that was fine, as long as they could manipulate the math. Now it's simply not enough. One of the things that we really need them to understand is that they need to be precise in their communication, and the only way to do that is using correct vocabulary. Good luck. So there's obviously continuity between grades, as I had discussed before in terms of our department meetings. One of the things that we focus on all year long is a consideration for leveling of students. We really like to pride ourselves on being fluid in terms of levels for students. So just because a student comes in, say, in the mid-level in 6th grade, does not mean he will necessarily leave in the mid-level in 8th grade. And again, our goal is to get as many of those students out of the lower levels and into the higher level mathematics as we can. And again, I think it's really important for you to understand that despite all of these wonderful resources that you have all provided to us, that most importantly, you have incredibly highly qualified teachers that, if the internet goes down or the PowerPoint doesn't work, that the pen and pencil always does. And our teachers are incredibly capable and know their content quite well. We also have a considerable amount of district collaboration. So if I were to kind of go back 3 years at this point, it started with us as well as Millikan having conversations about what we think would be in the best interest of our students. We started researching different programs. We had people come in and present to us. And in fact, we had volunteer teachers that piloted different units in different programs and gave us feedback on how successful they were. Ultimately, we agreed as both Northborough and Southborough that the big ideas was the way to go. And in addition to that, we also have, it's 9th and 10th grade, right? Resources at the high school. So in addition to that collaboration that got the program going, we now had this wonderful communication between towns that allowed us to develop common resources, develop common assessments, develop what are called district determined measures so we could look at our student growth. And now we have, I think, a very good continuity in terms of both towns feeding into the high school, whereas before, depending on what unit, what teacher, whatever, students might come in with different levels of understanding. And I think that now we have a much more common playing field, which in my opinion is only going to make them more successful at the high school level. And then finally, we always meet, so it's me and my counterpart at Millikan, and as discussed, Diane DeSantis at the high school, and we then review those placements from 8th grade to 9th grade, and we see how successful the students were, whether or not they were correctly placed, what we can do to change whether or not students were incorrectly placed in the future, so that moving forward, hopefully we keep that at a bare minimum. On to the problem. So this is one that the kids, they absolutely love, okay? I know it looks complex, we'll walk you through it, don't worry. So obviously they're immediately, they're hooked because they're talking about a remote control helicopter, and every single kid can relate to some sort of remote control device. And on the surface, it looks relatively, innocuous. So you're graphing the data. Is the domain discrete or continuous? So again, you can see that rigor of the required vocabulary. And then immediately goes into explaining why you believe what you believe, okay? So then comes the formal algebra part, where they've got to write a function that relates one variable to the other. And then they have to interpret slope and y-intercept. Again, something that is a skill that kids really struggle with. Understanding that the battery life is the percent, what that means if it starts at 54%, what the 0.06 represents, what your x-intercept, your y-intercept represent, and you will have to be able to communicate that in the context of this particular problem. Not just, the x-intercept is 4.5. Okay, great, what does that mean? Okay, lots of students can't then explain that it means that you flew the helicopter for 4.5 minutes before, it crashed, right? So again, it's really focusing on their explanation, their interpretation, the how and the why of math, not just, hey, Mr. Griffin said this is how you solve these problems, so I will solve the problems exactly like he showed me how to solve them, and if it doesn't fit that mold, I put a question mark and ask tomorrow in class. It's teaching them to be problem solvers and to really persevere in that problem solving so that they can get to an answer, not necessarily with the prescribed method that we showed them in class. Thank you, sir. So, the math practice standards. This is, I like to hang my hat on these. These are, in my opinion, the real driving force behind our curriculum K-8, which is why I think this is so incredibly valuable. So there are 8 math practice standards, and the 2 that govern basically all of them are Math Practice Standard 1 as well as Math Practice Standard 6. I have never gotten an answer as to why it's not 1 and 2, but it's not. So 6 is the obvious one, attend to precision, because ultimately in math you're going to have either a right or wrong answer. Practice Standard 1, however, is the one that kids really struggle with, which is making sense of problems and persevering in solving them, okay? I'm sure you guys have you've all had, actually, Roger, you have not had any students with me yet, but the rest of you can speak to the fact that that kids tend to, at the end of a homework assignment, say, oh, I don't get it, I don't get it, I don't get it, which really means those look complex, I don't want to put in the extra effort, we can discuss it tomorrow in class. So that's the persevering part. As well as the idea of, do they understand what the problem is actually asking of them, and then do they have a viable method to start? It's a common thread again through grades K to 12. I'm not sure, I think you guys will speak how it kind of appears at your level differently than 6 to 8. And again, they're clearly defined for the students in every single lesson, so they know what they're focusing on in terms of a good habit of mind. The final thing that I want to discuss is the concept of growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And the research says that usually you have kind of 2 different learners, all right? Obviously, growth mindset learner and fixed mindset learner. Your fixed mindset learner believes he is smart at math. He is good at math. He always has been good at math. He always will be good at math, despite effort. These are the kids that usually do incredibly well through 8th grade, maybe through 9th grade, maybe through 10th grade, okay? But eventually they reach a wall. And once they reach the wall, they don't really have tools to be able to succeed. They basically say, oh, I guess I'm no longer good at math. I used to be really good at math. Now I'm not good at math, so I'm not going to try anymore. Because I have been so successful, and if I try, I might not be successful, and I don't ever want to fail. So therefore, if I don't try, I don't fail, and therefore you don't learn, you don't grow. The growth mindset says, if I have effective effort, if I keep trying, despite how many times I get it wrong, eventually I will have that ability to tease out what I didn't understand, and then adapt that to what I can then understand and solve better. We're trying to get as many kids into the former mindset as opposed to the latter mindset, because that's really a life skill. It's not just a math skill. It's whether or not you are given a problem and you're willing to tackle it. You're willing to stick with it despite getting things wrong. And again, raising your hand in an 8th grade math classroom you're putting yourself out there, and kids know you're either going to be right or wrong. And why should I raise my hand when I know that Billy raises his hand every single time when there's like 4 seconds of pause because he can recognize the teacher's struggling, so he's going to save the teacher, and I don't need to do that because Billy will do it every time. It's really getting them to feel comfortable with being wrong as long as they understand why they're wrong and then how to fix that.
So we talked a little bit about the consistent math tools and resources that teachers have access to. But I think over the past several years, the district has made a significant investment in teachers' professional development. And as we discussed, although those tools and resources are important, those will change over time. And the biggest investment that we can make is in the mathematical practice and content knowledge of our teachers. And the most important resource that we can provide students are great teachers. So that's a district philosophy that we have used in the past and will continue to use. We've worked closely with outside consultants in providing professional development. We've worked with our publishers to provide PD around how to use the tools and resources. And this is an approach that will continue in the years to come because it's really paid off. And also teacher collaboration, that in addition to excellent teachers and teacher leadership, we also have excellent leadership at the building level in terms of our building principals. They've done an excellent job leading these curriculum initiatives and providing guidance, and also developing structures around having teachers work together around professional learning communities, having conversations, and not working in isolation, but rather collaborating around mathematics instruction. So next steps, our work has never done. There's always room for improvement and growth. We're really looking at expansion of digital resources. We feel like we've just kind of scratched the surface in terms of the types of resources we can provide students. We really want to focus on rigorous assessments and making sure that kids are prepared for solving authentic type problems and getting them ready for next generation assessments. Our work around curriculum alignment and curriculum mapping K through 12 will continue. We have consistent curriculum maps K through 12 in terms of what's expected grade level by grade level. So no matter if what 4th grade teacher your son or daughter may have, the curriculum is consistent and the expectations are consistent. Continue to focus on mathematics discourse and the language around mathematics, and making sure that kids understand that math is a language and that when working with mathematics, that language is essential. And we're very fortunate to have the support of the school committee in the town, with the addition of a 0.5 math coach who will be in the budget next year. And that person will provide additional leadership to the teachers as well as building principals, and really look at that vertical alignment of curriculum and also focus on assessment. And lastly, looking at the connection with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, really looking at the connection between science and mathematics and making sure our kids are engaged in authentic real-world applications when solving problems. And I'd just like to end on, is all of this work working in terms of are we seeing student outcomes? And when we look at all of this investment in mathematics, it's important to look at what the results are. And as you know, one way we look at results is looking at our MCAS scores. So I'd like to just quickly take a minute and talk about some of the growth that we've seen. This is Woodward School, and if you look at 2011 to 2015, we've had a high percentage of students scoring proficient or higher. And what the slide does not tell is a story that we've had a significant number of students moving from proficient to advanced, and 71% of our students at Woodward School were advanced in mathematics this past year. At the Neary School, if you look at the number of students performing percent higher, in 2011 was 69%. In 2015, we had 85% students. So again, we have a positive slope in terms of student performance and achievement. A very similar story at Trotter School, where in 2011 we had 67% students scoring proficient or higher, and in 2015 we had 77%. And lastly, if we look at the aggregate data, again, in 2011, 71% of Southborough students scored proficient or higher, and then in 2015, 82%. So the data is supporting that the work we're doing is making a difference in terms of student achievement, which is very important when we're evaluating curriculum and the decisions we're making around changes. So I think it's a very, very positive story, one that is supported by data. And lastly, I just want to share that we have outstanding educators. The most important resource that we have to provide students are our teachers. We have outstanding math teachers with a very collaborative environment, and we have outstanding principals. That's a recipe for great success, and I think we're seeing that in the area of mathematics as well as other areas. So we thank you for your time, and we're thrilled to share this story with you, and we'd be happy to answer any specific questions that you have.
There was one, you brought up district determined measures. Can you talk a little bit about where we are with that and how they apply math? And I assume it's being done at a regional level now?
Yeah, so as part of the educator evaluation,
Yeah.
One of the components of that evaluation system is common assessments.
Yeah.
So district determined measures really what we define as a common assessment. And basically, a common assessment is an assessment that for example, all fourth grade students take that's consistent. And once we've administered that assessment, that data goes back to teachers, and we measure how the impact teachers are having in terms of student achievement. So it's a kind of an interesting concept. The concept is that we have a common assessment that looks at growth of students, and teachers across a grade level or across a content area can look at how they're impacting achievement. So it's a consistent measure. That is one more data point that teachers can use to look at their effectiveness, and that is K through 12. We have those measurements.
Okay, so we've created our own measurements.
Correct. Yeah.
I have one or two questions. Especially, it seemed like at Woodward, Neary, and Finn, you talked a lot about things going on in small groups, and one of our priorities as a school committee is to keep class sizes small. And it strikes me that if that kind of thing is going on, class size must matter a fair amount.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I can speak to the way I kind of set up my classroom, and I think it's very similar, especially after kind of walking around and looking at classrooms and having our discussions. But, we pre-test before we begin teaching. So based on the data from those pre-tests, we can kind of look at where the needs are, given what we're going to be teaching, and then kind of group the students. So they're all working on the same concepts, but their level that they're starting at might be different, but by the end they're all ending with at least the standard expectation, and then maybe beyond. So I mean without small class sizes, it's very difficult to put them in those small groups and kind of have the time to meet every child.
Is there sort of a magic number that you don't want to go beyond?
I love my 18 this year. Well, I think 20 is manageable. I think beyond 20 is tricky, especially at the early elementary. I don't know if you feel the same way, but
Yeah, this year we have about 23 in a class in grade 5. And that can be difficult if you don't have the right supports in your classroom. So I'm fortunate enough this year, I'm doing a co-teaching model. So there are 2 classroom teachers. We have 2 aides who are in our classroom during our math blocks, and sometimes a special education teacher. So with our model, we are definitely able to, even with a little bit higher number, because we have that extra support in classroom, we are able to still break up into small groups when we do it. But like Lisa said, I think the smaller the number, obviously, the easier and the more time you're gonna have with individual children and with small groups. So I think 20 would be kind of ideal.
In a 20-student class, do you break that into like 4 or 5 person groups or 4
So-
student groups or does it depend or
I think
different
it really,
sizes in
yeah,
groups? Or?
it really depends based on the pretest because there have been times, I have 18 students this year, so there have been times where I've had 6, 6, and 6, and they rotate and that works. But there are other times that I have a group of 2, and I might have a group of 8. So, you know, it depends on what their need is given whatever unit we're studying.
And do, throughout a class, then I presume different groups, you segment, have different needs.
Mhm.
And I know, like Lisa had mentioned, again, I can speak to my classroom because I'm living it every day. Still doing that pretest, and and I'm sure you're the same way. The groups are never the same. You know, you do your pretest at the beginning, find out what the needs of the kids are, and like Lisa said, I've had sometimes some units that I've had a group of 4 and a group of 8. Next time around, next unit, next topic, we pretest again, and those groups are shifting and changing based on the needs of the kids and the strengths, because some kids are really visual and they do much better with, say, our geometry units than something like our fraction units, which are a little more conceptually challenging.
Does the pretest result hold up pretty well for that specific thing you were pretesting for? I understand that you get to the next one, you pretest again, and it could shift. Is it generally successful?
Yeah, generally. I mean, there have definitely been times where, you know, those first couple of days in a topic, a kid who I thought was going to be in a lower group catches on really quickly, and there's no reason why they can't bounce up.
Okay.
Or if they, you know, you start them too high and they're really struggling with that group, then they can bounce down.
I have one question on online resources. We know that we were looking at a chart from 2011 to 2015, and I would assume that over that amount of time, we've probably looked at more ways for the children to get online to learn more things about math and other courses. Have you found it to be helpful in terms of their achievement in general? That's one question. And do you think that obviously a lot of the kids need to have some way of getting online at home? Do you feel that they have the ability to get online at home, or has that ever been a problem?
It's rarely a problem that a kid has
Okay.
a difficult time getting online.
Okay. So they have
And
the
if they
equipment-
do, like, usually we'll help them at school with whatever they need to do.
Okay.
But not often. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
And do we find though that as we're looking at more things online, do you think it's affecting their achievement in a positive way? Or were you saying, for example, that a student can kind of go through some self-paced things online, and it can gear them towards the areas where they're struggling? Do we take advantage of that as much as possible? How do we work with that?
You can.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So again, this is our first year using the Pearson products, the SuccessNet. One of the things that I really like about it is once you give that review assessment, it does give them some kind of automatically generated review activities or reviewing some videos to watch. So again, being our first year, I can't really speak to its effectiveness over the long range, but I definitely think it's helpful to them to kind of go at their own pace. If they are successful in it, then they can move on and they don't have to go back and spend time reviewing something that they're already proficient in. So it kind of automatically generates some activities for them to do based on how they do. So
I think that's the next step is to look at
Yeah.
the analysis of data through the use of online assessments.
Yeah.
So right now, teachers are spending a lot of time aggregating and disaggregating data manually. With the technology tools, it does it automatically. So the focus is around looking at the data and analyzing the data and forming instructional groups. And it also, in the future, will provide opportunities for personalized learning. So kids who need to be accelerated in certain concepts, it will actually help create that pathway for them. So I think we're, again, just scratching the surface in terms of what technology can do in terms of instruction, and which leads to strong achievement with kids.
And I think, at the early elementary level, it's a little bit different because it can take the kids 10, 15 minutes to log in independently. So, I definitely think the engagement is there for kids when you throw any sort of technology. But it's a little bit different with individualized student use because of the long process to have kids log in. I mean, I just went from 3rd grade to 2nd grade this past year, and I couldn't believe it took us 3 computer classes to teach them how to type their first and last name into the computer to log on. I was shocked. So, it's a little bit different in terms of the way that we use it with the little guys.
Yeah, it's a process.
It's definitely a process.
But one piece that I've noticed almost immediately is that students are getting immediate feedback. Like Tom mentioned, they don't have to wait till the next day review of the homework assignment. With a couple of clicks, they can get a video or an explanation or another example that kind of gears them in that direction. That we've heard has immediately had an impact. So I don't know longitudinally, like Kelly said, will it absolutely guarantee higher achievement? But we're already seeing, a pattern in that direction, I think I would say.
Yeah, I know that I take some online courses that are geared that way too. It's just amazing what you can, what you can do today.
You don't have to wait till tomorrow.
But it is a combination. It's the real live teacher
Yep.
and the online tool.
Yep.
It's the whole
It
thing
definitely
together.
has to be a blended classroom. I mean, the other important thing is that, each individual kid can, the goal is to get them to recognize whether or not they understand something and get them to then use the tool correctly.
Yeah.
And it was somewhat tongue in cheek when I was saying, they say it the same way that I say it. The point is that they're motivated to learn it, and hearing it multiple times just kind of drives it home.
Yeah.
So it might have been something as simple as, a tiny misconception that when they hear it a second or a third time, or they see it done in a different example, they're like, oh, okay, now that makes perfect sense. And again, that individualization is really important, but I think it's still early.
I think that there's a tremendous amount of research around factors that impact student achievement, and the number one factor is the classroom teacher.
I
The
was just
teacher
gonna
has
say,
the
I
biggest
liked
impact.
hearing,
Oh, sure,
that we're still, yes, we keep looking at, should we buy software, should we go to Envision, whatever, but also that we're also investing in our teachers, because making sure, hopefully we've always focused on professional development, because the
Oh, yes.
teachers are the key
Yes, sir.
here. The teachers are the key in making sure the teachers
Right.
have the skills to then,
Yeah,
you
I
can
was
have
in a
all the.
workshop last Thursday, right? Was it Thursday?
So it's great.
Yeah, it's been a crazy couple of weeks, but yeah, it was. I think, and we, the whole point of the whole day. So we had the entire department together, and we were only focused on math practice standard 4 and 5. So the idea of modeling in mathematics and using tools strategically, which is actually answering your question there perfectly. The tool could be something as simple as a pen and pencil, but it might be a digital resource. It might be a manipulative. It might be drawing a graph. It might be creating a table. And whether or not they're able to tease out what is the most effective, what is the most efficient method, is again a real, important skill that they need to know themselves.
Great, you said you're just scratching the surface of, I guess, differentiated learning and especially for the more advanced kids. I mean, to what extent, I guess, are these tools helping you deal with the more advanced kids?
I think that as we see, more personalized learning and acceleration in terms of these tools that we have access to, at the high school level, for example, we have a number of students who are taking online classes at Stanford and MIT. A lot of the colleges and universities are now making their resources available, so students can be accelerated. We just were engaged in a conversation today about a few students who are ready to be accelerated, who are 7th graders. They're going to be taking some courses at the high school next year. That's through technology that we're able to do those types of things.
You mean
but
they won't actually be at the high school?
It will be a blended experience for a student. So we're, again, those resources are starting to come to fruition, and I think they'll be more dynamic and more powerful as we look to the future.
Good. Yes.
So that, I want to say that was a great presentation.
it?
That
Yes.
was the star of the year.
Very, very good.
I thank all.
I don't know about that.
That was very good.
Thank you,
Thank you.
that was great.
Thank you. We
Very
appreciate
good.
Appreciate you hanging out this late, too.
Yes, and taking the time to get together, so it's good for us, we need to hear.
Listen, with any luck, I don't have to put my kids to bed.
All right.
Sure you don't
I
have any
a
more
few
questions?
Okay, stay around for an audience share.
I don't know about that. Thank you, though. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On to old business, we have a legislative update, we have a few things here. You want to start with charter school discussion?
As the budget process has moved through, while our budgets are approved, we certainly recognize that there's still ongoing conversations at the state level. The governor's budget has just recently been reviewed by the House, and they in fact have presented several proposals, as well as the Senate, and several topics that we've engaged in conversations with over time that impact the eventual passage of the budget, hopefully sooner than later, have sort of blended together in various forms, one being charter schools, another being the support of the Foundation Review Commission's work, and several bills have been moving through the House, one of which has recently been revised and is moving through the Senate to the House, which incorporated some language about placing restrictions on the charter schools, maybe limiting the cap on charter schools, identifying the types of students who can attend charter schools by expanding the language. And very early on this year, prior to going to the MASC conference, we talked about one of the resolutions being holding the charter schools accountable for the same language that the public schools are accountable for. In other words, reporting information about the teachers, making sure that the teachers are held to the same licensure standards as public school educators, which they are now not, making sure that the outcomes of assessments are reported. And so that has been encapsulated in the bill that's moving through the Senate, otherwise known as RISE. And also including in that bill some language about supporting the Foundation Review Commission's findings. So that's one movement that's moving through and being modified. There's some significant conversation that as it moves from the Senate to the House, it will continue to morph into what we're not sure. At the same time, I know Dave is here, and we're sort of going to piggyback, I guess, on with one another. The Massachusetts Teachers Association has really moved forward with language about creating a resolution against lifting the cap on Commonwealth charter schools, and that is simultaneously moving through. I think MTA did finally approve that resolution and would ask support of school committees as well. And then we have the singular request to provide a letter of support for the legislator to really take a look at the Foundation Review Commission's language. So it's all sort of moving in and out of language that's moving through the Senate and the House. Hopefully we will see a good compromise bill that will provide some meaningful language and relief to school districts, holding everyone accountable to the same standards. But we're not really sure what that final product is going to look like. Again, our process has ended successfully with the vote of our budget last evening, but this is going to take form for another couple months. I'm hopeful that when we visit our legislators on the Day of the Hill, we'll be able to have some of these conversations. It's 2 weeks away, in April 26th, and maybe get some better understanding what's coming out of the House at this point, and the Senate, and have some conversations about this. Tonight, we have, again, before you, the request to support the Foundation Review Commission's finding, which no matter which bill or which conversation is taking place, that seems to be a common thread that's running through all of the conversations, that's going to provide some relief in terms of Chapter 70 funding for cities and towns by taking a look at really up-to-date current numbers around qualifications of teachers, costs of special ed, those kinds of variables, and it was an extensive review. So that is one common thread, along with the charter school language. But again, where it ends up, this evening we could take a number of positions. We could vote, committee could vote to support the Foundation Review Commission's findings and send a letter to, as we've done in the past, very successfully so, to our legislators. And whether we want to engage in a conversation right now about the charter schools and lifting the cap, I think we could potentially do that, but there are so many other issues with respect to charter school. Just lifting the cap and not holding them accountable to the same standards really creates an equitable educational playing field for students. And so we may want to, wait a little. We have time. I think that's going to be something that's discussed for quite some time, not just between now and the end of the budget process. Just today, hot off the press, I received a copy of the House line item overview, and actually would share this with you. Right now, this is where the House's budget versus the governor's budget numbers fall. I'm delighted to see that the funding for the early literacy initiatives, while that may have gone by the board from the governor to the House budget, the kindergarten grant funding is still in there, solidly so, and as identified as one of the pieces that appears to still be going forward, which is $18.6 million for kindergarten expansion grants. This is something that we've talked about a little bit this year with respect to our considering the changing in kindergarten. We've done some amazing things with our budget moving forward for next year to help move our kindergarten discussion and our kindergarten program forward with the half and full day differentiation of the day. But it's good to see this grant money is here, and we're hopeful that when it finally comes out in final form, we'll be able to take some advantage of that. But again, this is very much in flux, and what we know is there now may not be there in another month when that budget moves forward. So I would support our conversation last week and move forward with the House, the recommendation to send a letter to our legislators supporting the Commission's review on Chapter 78. Of all the things that are moving around, that's the most consistent. I think there's a sample letter that's before you. Okay, it's the same one we had last.
Yeah, we passed it around last month. I mean, to me, it's just, all it is saying, the state has a funny way of passing laws and then not funding them. So it's just,
Really?
it's just asking them to fund.
I'll just say it, unfunded mandate, it's my word.
But I have a question,
Sure.
just to clarify something. So this resolution basically is calling for full funding of the FBRC's recommendations, and it's identified the 2 areas: employee health insurance, special ed. And it goes on to say in the rationale part that it found that the current formula understates costs significantly in those 2 areas, health insurance and special ed. And then it says if the recommendations of the FBRC had been implemented in 15, it would have been about 500 million more. Okay, so it's obviously, since Chapter 70, since it talks about if it had reflected the true cost, it would have been 4 times that, or 2 billion. What do they mean by saying that the current, that the recommendations would have been 500 million more? That's still 1.5 billion less than Chapter 70, reflecting the true cost of education. So I'm missing something. If we're calling upon them to fully fund the FBRC's recommendations,
Mhm.
which one of those are we asking them to do? I know you can pass a law and not fund it, but
I believe we're asking them to support the final recommendations of the committee. And I know that's,
which is
seems,
less,
Than-
which is significantly less than the true cost of education. That's the
but
point.
significantly more than that.
It's
what
some,
we're
certainly,
funding now.
certainly some more, right, right.
Take a step forward
Right.
from
Take-
where we are now.
Let's go 25% of the way.
Right, take an
Basically.
incremental
Okay.
step forward. With a more realistic hope that that is a
I
realistic
get it.
request.
So the point is, look, we really have this much shortfall. We're just asking you to fund 25% of that, if you will, or part of it. Okay.
And to start closing that gap. And again, you know, the review commission really just completed one cycle of its review, and that's what it was authorized to do. There was a request for them to continue their work as part of that entire review process. And I'm not sure at this point where it lies with the legislator, the State House, whether they're going to try to see what success they've had with sort of phase one of that review, or continue the process. The conversation seems to have stopped at this point as to whether they're going to reauthorize the work of this commission, but they feel, they being the members of the review committee, that they've done some very good work at this point in time, at least to shine the light and to bring to the forefront some conversations about some blatant gaps in terms of how we're calculating Chapter 70 funding now versus what the actual expenditures are in those categories. Teacher salaries, the average teacher salary was another area, and I'm not sure if that's highlighted specifically, but the last time a review had been conducted, or a writing of Chapter 70, teachers were not required to hold a master's degree and continue to pursue their education. So in that area, so just that gap alone has created a significant change in the average teacher salary over time. And I think that was going to be continued part of the conversation if it was reauthorized. So they picked the biggest apples on the tree to pick, I think, at this point.
So would this be a generic motion, basically just to, move to, for this committee or this school system to
Support the
call for full funding of the FBRC's recommendations? That
Well, I think it would be to
basically-
support this resolution.
To support,
This resolution is being voted on by school committees across the state. It comes from the MASC. So, I mean, that would be my approach.
well, I'll move that, that we support this resolution calling for full funding of the Foundation Budget Review Commission's recommendations as stated in the resolution, I guess.
That's probably what I would have said too, and I second it.
Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Yep.
I would ask with respect to the charter school discussion, this is going to continue. It's a very hot topic on many different levels. That one of the most concerning pieces of the charter school discussion is really that equitable landscape in terms of how charter schools are held accountable. Again,
Exactly.
this was discussed at the MASC.
Leveling
resolution.
the playing field.
Level the playing field, and regardless if there's a cap, there's a raising of the cap, a lowering of the cap, this inequitable landscape is problematic.
Right.
We're constantly compared to charter schools, but in reality, it's a comparison that is not realistic.
Right.
It's not.
It's a different group of students, it's a different group of
Absolutely.
teachers, it's a different way of funding.
Right.
I mean, the funding they get from us is unreal.
And some of the other conversation as well is for charter schools to really start enrolling more students who are defined however you want to define at risk. But again, we're opening their doors to
all students, just as we are asked to do on a daily basis. And provide the necessary supports for those children so that they can be successful regardless of what school they choose to attend. So I think that's a piece of the language that placing the financial aspects aside is really important. It's a message that we would want to send at some point, that we believe any child who participates in an educational experience should have the same equal opportunities and schools be held to the same accountability factors. So I think, that's a conversation to be had when we move to the State House, visit the State House on the 26th, but really to be mindful about what language is moving forward, and at an opportune time, at least not make it about the money, but make it about what's right for kids.
Right. Another piece of this charter school discussion that's always kind of hurt me was, as I understand it, charter schools as originally conceived were supposed to be sort of incubators for new ideas that would filter back into the larger public school system. Has that ever happened, do you know?
I haven't seen a lot of chickens hatch our way in the process at all. So I would say not yet.
Yeah.
And virtually, we heard earlier today about the importance of collaboration to turn a vision into reality. So our vision was, 4 years in the making, and that would not have been realized without extensive collaboration. So sharing of practice is very important. It advances innovation. It makes sure it ensures equal opportunity for students. And I haven't been asked to attend a lot of superintendents' roundtables with charter schools. And I would say neither have my colleagues, and neither have our administrative team or our teachers. So it's definitely not a two-way dialogue. Excellent point.
Anything else? Now to the superintendent's report committee, fiscal 16 budget.
The financial report as of March 31st is included in your report. And I would ask that you approve until audited.
Do we want us to put it until we
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes,
we did
we are.
last time. Okay.
Good.
It is good to approve until audited tonight. We say joyfully.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we approve the financial report of March 31st, 2016 until audited.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous.
This may actually be the last time you see the FY17
Oh,
budget
good.
priorities. I
Thank
think
you.
we have certainly had a lot of conversation, and we have approved an approved budget that reflects those priorities, as well as the budget calendar. It's almost sad to say I'm not sure we're going to meet again in FY17, but I'm sure FY18 will be right around the corner. So we just share those as sort of one last visit, as well as the FY17 approved budget. We'll be dusting that off in short order in August, and starting to have those reports come forward. So a cycle
Freshly
finished.
approved by the town.
Yes, approved by the town.
By the time. I'll need to go to the order, so it's good to go.
And our enrollments are in the packet for you to consider. We're very close to, we're actually up a few students from when we started at the beginning of the year. And you'll see the projected numbers as well. I was looking at the enrollment numbers as Kelly and Lisa and Tom were talking about ideal class sizes, and for the most part, I was busily checking to make sure if we were going to have a discussion. We're pretty much in line with those.
Yeah.
And
Except she's right, that fifth grade is
fifth
excellent.
grade. But it's good to hear that our support services and our, our staffing to provide those are well in place. And I think the flexibility on the part of the administrators to appropriately deploy those support services where most necessary is well in place.
Now for kindergarten, we're still looking at 160, well, this, I think it was the same number as last month. It was 116 is what we have registered today. Do we still think it might end up close to 130, or?
I think it probably won't hit 130, but it should be between 120 and 125.
Okay.
again, if it goes with what it's been in the last few years,
Yeah.
it would always between 10 and 15 more
Yeah.
than what we originally have registered. So you don't know, it seems like we register 2 and then 2 unregistered.
It's, you know, it's really hard, it is, I mean, these numbers are not easy to,
No.
to, you know,
Yeah.
There's a lot of houses on the market too. Yeah.
yeah. you're right.
Yeah, some days we'll get 3 calls and then we don't get calls for a week. You know, so it's just, it's really.
Yeah, they're all gonna, that's okay, they're all moving it over the summer,
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
All right. Educational policy,
We have second readings on 2 policies this evening. One is the physical restraint prevention and behavior support policy. We do have some edits that I'm not sure we've actually reflected in this document. We're missing the parentheses and then there's a word edit, together, I believe.
Now, the physical restraint policy, this is one that we really, there are ones that we really have to get done this year, right? And this is the main one, right?
This is really the policy that needs to be in place at the end of the year.
Okay.
The state Department of Education has given us a window to develop this policy, for the most part with clarifying points that were raised in the first read. This is legalese as a policy right out of the general law that was created. We've had training under this policy. All of our administrators have been trained and out by the special ed department, and all of our staff have been trained at the appropriate level, at the school level. That had to be in place. But what wasn't in place yet was the official language to support that. So there is I shared this in the first read, there is a procedural PowerPoint that, without exaggeration, is probably 1 inch thick. And that will become embedded in our mandatory training next year, whether it becomes a part of our online PowerPoint presentation that everyone goes through to meet all those mandatory trainings, or whether we do that on a sort of school-wide basis, an individual basis with our staff. I think we haven't determined yet, but this does have to be in place this year.
And I think on both of these policies, if I'm remembering back to to our regional meeting, the intent was to review them, was to do a reading in the school committee, so that we're prepared for the next combined meeting to vote on them. Is that right?
Yes.
Correct,
That's why we have a
and
second.
we do have an opportunity tonight to bring this back one more time in May if there's some edits that the committee wants to recommend or concerns that are expressed, maybe needs greater clarification. And as well, it's moving forward elsewhere, and when we present this for vote in a combined meeting, we'll have had an opportunity 3 times to review the policy. And again, as always, even though it's moving forward at combined, every committee has an option to accept, vote as is, or to make some changes based on the school committee's decision at each level. So this is actually our second reading,
Right.
but if further clarification is requested by the committee, we have 1 more month to review that and to have a conversation before we take a vote on that in June. It's June.
so are we better off not voting tonight and waiting for it to come out in case somebody else has some changes?
So I think one of the
There wasn't a vote on it.
the great suggestions is to look at this as a committee tonight, make some suggestions in terms of clarifications that you'd like. So for example, this was not moved forward as a first read. It combined with one of the committees that reviewed this, and they actually did come back with some requests for clarification, which I can share with you. So when we see this again, hopefully it will be again reviewed by council, clarified on points that were raised, and they're not so much a departure from the language as could you further define what it means to have a staff member trained? Who is that specific staff member? And what are the qualifications of that staff member? So again, some clarifications on that language. We did clarify and define prone restraint. That was a question that came up at combined. We also note in red, there was a question about what's the difference between a medication restraint and a chemical restraint. So we did go back and include that clarification. Again, seeking clarification on what is inclusionary, and to some extent, these are addressed in the procedural piece that's a part of this, that PowerPoint, that training piece that comes along with the policy. So there's further definition in that section and in that part of this policy. But again, we have an opportunity to identify areas of concern from this committee, and hopefully, when we all meet in May, everyone has had a chance to have one final review, and the final document seeking clarification will be presented to everyone in May. Region will have looked at this, and K-8 Northborough would have looked at this, and in May, when we bring this back, all the input from everyone who's reviewed this, which is wonderful to have so many eyes looking at a document, will be reflected in that.
Right. They've
final
been around.
draft.
They've been around for a long time. It's kind of funny to say this is our second. This is probably my 5th read through it.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
also mentioned council's review. This is
Mhm.
probably one of those documents that council review is extremely important.
Yes. But they do miss a few things now and then. And so it's nice to point out, for example, the chemical, restraint, when that was brought back, to them it's obvious, to us it isn't. And so clarifying that for the folks who are not so familiar with the policy is important. And so, while it may not be the legal language that necessarily was included in the language, it's equally as important for us to have clarification so we're feeling comfortable with what it means. And for parents as well who really don't review this 5 or 6 times or 7 times, or have the benefit of talking with counsel, just to make that even more clear to anybody who picks up the document is important.
In that case, I'm going to renew a concern that I raised, I think, at that combined meeting on page 3. It says, following requirements apply to the use of exclusionary timeout. It has a bunch of bullet points. Third one says the staff member will either be with the student or immediately available to the student at all times. And 2 down from that, unless it poses a safety risk, a staff member must be physically present with the student who is in exclusionary time. Next one, if it is not safe for the staff member to be present, and then goes on to explain what you should do. To me, that's confusing to say in one bullet, the staff member has to be there or immediately available to the student at all times. And then go on to sort of explain the same thing, or different versions of the same thing. I mean, I think if we just take out number 3, that third
Oh,
bullet
I was
point,
just gonna say, I
you'd
think
be
you
fine.
take out 3 and then say,
Where did it come from? Is this from the state law?
This is from the review of council, which is
Okay.
pretty much lifted, but that doesn't mean that we can't raise this point, and without justification for it, it could conceivably be removed. Maybe they just added a bullet
I
line.
mean, I had to read that like 5 times to say, well, how is this different from that?
Well, one of the biggest concerns on this particular policy is we tried to kind of pass through and see what was state law specifically stated, and what pieces did we, and that's one of the biggest problems that I had on it. So,
So on those 3 points, I think if it is to be there, there needs to be further explanation as to what makes the situation in bullet 1 or bullet 5 or the
well, it's
next one
almost like you
different.
have bullet 1 and then bullet 5 and says are explaining
Right.
what bullet 3 means. So you have bullet 3, kind of saying you're either with the student or immediately available to the student. Maybe those are sort of explaining what that means.
But doesn't 5 basically
Yeah.
say the same thing?
Yeah,
Yes.
oh, exactly. I was just
In
saying if it was
other-
state
in other
law.
words- in
I
other words-
totally think you could get rid of 3.
Yeah, the staff member
Yeah.
will be on either with the student, well, okay, number 5 says the staff member must be physically present,
Exactly.
unless, what did you say?
So I'd be happy to bring that back, ask for further explanation. If they need to be there, at least why do they need
Right.
to be there? And that means clarification of the statement, of the bullet, if it needs to be there to some extent.
If
Well,
it
I
meant
mean,
something else.
It doesn't make it wrong exactly, it's just, to me, it's
Redundant.
confusing.
it was contradictory, you know?
Is it contradictory?
Well, I don't know if it's contradictory.
Well, one says you have to be with the student, the other one says you don't.
No, one says you have to be with the student or immediately available, then you get to the 5th one down and it's like,
It basically overall says you really need to be with the student unless there's a safety risk of
Right.
being with the student. That's basically what they all say.
but they say it like 3 different ways, so, yeah, exactly.
Well, the big discussion of all of this isn't even addressed, it's really how do you define exclusionary and when is a student necessarily in an exclusionary setting? So, you know, if you send a child to the office, as we sometimes do, just because they need a timeout, does that count as a timeout? And is that exclusionary? So on the teacher side and the training side, that's a lot of the conversation that takes place, is that definition of what's included in the broader term exclusionary. And so that was really, I think, the purpose of this, and to do incremental definition of exclusionary and when there is an exclusionary situation, when and how and under what conditions should a staff member be with them at some or all of the time. And so it needs clarification if we are to ask anyone who's not going through the training to understand it.
It is a complex issue. I mean, for example, what happens if a student is displaying self-injurious behavior and it poses a safety risk?
Which is
To
very
be or not to be
Right.
present.
Especially
And
as
yet,
they-
you know, the staff is expected to follow the rules,
especially
so
as
the
they
rules
get
need to be
older and
clear
stronger.
to know what to follow.
Yeah.
And thankfully, there's a procedural piece that goes with the language that I know we've spent a lot of time with staff on, and that even requires further clarification. I know some questions came up from staff that Marie had to go back and sort of get some answers on. And with any new policy, you know, implement it, and then let's figure out how it really works as we move through this and actually have to engage in some of the implementation steps of the procedural piece. So be happy to have that more fully vetted and bring that back next month.
Thank you.
Any other points of question on this? So we're going to choose another color. Maybe we should color code the committees for next month, but it'll be a colorful document by the time it comes back. The second policy, the naloxone policy, the only edit that was suggested is that if we're going to refer to it as Narcan, that whenever we refer to it as Naxalon in the policy itself, we put Narcan in parentheses. So I believe in the first paragraph, in the last sentence, we identify it as naloxone, but we don't use sort of the vernacular of Narcan. So that was the only edit so far that has been suggested with this policy. I will say that when we developed this policy, there was a conversation that took place that since it is new and it's something that everyone is just really embracing within our school setting, that there would probably be some changes. And sure enough, the opioid bill was passed, and there's some new language embedded in that. I think this will probably come up for review again sooner than any other policy, simply because it's evolving. And so the policy committee, the subcommittee, had a lot of conversation about, well, does the Good Samaritan law apply or does the Good Samaritan not apply, and who should be trained and who shouldn't be trained. And at that time, our nurse leaders had just come from training, and that training included language that only the nurses should be administering this. And then the opioid bill was passed, and that sort of changed the landscape a little bit. As we move closer to the end of the year, having something in place is better than not, and we can probably look forward to changing the language in the policy based on the passage of the new bill. We really haven't had time to examine what all that language change means. So if there are no changes, then the committee could vote to move this to combine in its current state.
Why not?
Okay.
Okay. And then again, we'd probably take a vote again to combine this so that everybody's in the same process.
So
of it.
is our vote to approve this and to move it to the combined, or just to approve it? What is our motion?
Then combined, we wouldn't have a vote for Southborough then. That's what would happen. So in other words, if we vote for it now, then it will go to combined, but it's done in Southborough.
Right. So we can
And
hold
are
off and
you,
vote
do you
together.
support that, or do you think that's ill-advised?
I don't know, it may change,
Yeah, me too.
Okay,
so
so,
let's
Hold
not
off.
go through this again.
Okay.
But we'll change in time for this.
roll with it on
that
your
next
schedule.
meeting.
But they made better sense.
Well, the thing is, Christine, if you're saying it could change, is that, are we gonna be aware of what the changes are for the combined meeting?
It will not change this year in its current state.
Okay, so either way, if we vote for tonight or we vote for the combined meeting, it's not gonna change.
Not this form, in this form. It will most likely change again as it goes through that process next year.
It would be
But
up
to
next
have
year.
this in place at the end of this year makes good sense.
Right.
I agree, we can vote tonight, or we can, in solidarity, vote at the combined meeting in case there are other edits from regional or Northborough when it reviews its policy for a second time. So, do nothing makes good sense. Not always, but tonight it might make sense.
I like that.
Okay.
That's easy to do that.
well, the only reason not to vote it tonight is because it could change,
Yes,
Right.
even though
we hope.
there's a belief that it's not going to change.
Right.
Plus, we love those 3 committee votes that come out,
Right.
Right, so we've got to keep track of who's seconded.
I've learned just to sit back and wait until no one else moves.
I like when you get to like move the three of them.
With advisors, yeah.
All right, we have distribution of personnel report.
Yes, we have 2 noteworthy items, both under retirements. 2 folks who have been part of our school community for some time are moving on to explore the world beyond our schools, or at least from 8 to 3, or what that looks like. Dolores Kerner is a special ed aide at Neary School, and she will be embracing life in other forms beyond our school doors in June. And then Mary Ellen Shields, who's certainly been with us for a number of years, has done amazing work as a teacher and as a reading specialist, will also be retiring at the end of this school year.
Wow. Good for Mary Ellen. She deserves
So we
it.
thank them for their great work with our students and
Exactly.
as members of our professional community.
Both have new grandchildren, so they're so
That'll do it. Yeah. Okay.
Communications, we have the district doings.
District doings, you all should be receiving this directly when it goes out. We've added you, or made sure that we've tried to add you to the one call. If you're still not getting it,
I'm not getting it.
okay. Anyone else not receiving, tried to read it?
I don't think I'm getting it through.
Well, these guys are still on school.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll make,
So, yeah.
double check on that tomorrow.
I forgot it was school vacation week next week, so
So
it's
my
my
son.
first, well, this is my first year with nobody.
Wow. That is good.
It's kind of nice.
Very different.
Kind of like every other week.
Exactly.
And there's still time to go to
Do
Boston.
we need to register?
Cheryl Lepre is
I know.
registering everyone. I think we have 3 at this point.
We just registered today.
I know. So Cheryl will register. Okay, so I should shoot her an email.
Yep.
I'll go.
And we do know that we have an appointment with Carolyn Dykema already scheduled, and looks like Jamie Eldridge, Senator Eldridge, and hopefully with Danielle Gregoire, who, while she may not represent our district, is the vice chair of the education committee, so always excellent. And we're trying for others, but those are 3 right now.
You know what time those are?
I know that Carolyn is at, Representative Dykema is at 11. And there was some discussion if we wanted to meet with Senator Eldridge and Representative Dykema at the same time, and I suggested that probably wasn't what we wanted to do. And so we're trying to get Senator Eldridge sometime close to that. But at this point, we don't have any.
Presentation again,
No.
too, is there?
Well, last time we missed all the presentations by
Right.
whoever, so
Okay.
it'd be good to get some of that anyway.
Yeah. Can't hurt to do both.
We also had a fire alarm.
Yeah.
So that really cut into our conversation.
Yeah.
Conversational time with our legislators.
Okay.
All right. Action on minutes from last month. Is that a motion?
Yes, I make a motion that we,
That works here?
yeah, look, I make a motion that we accept the minutes of Wednesday, March 9th, 2016 for the Southborough School Committee open meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Bills and payrolls, have a few. Agenda items for next month. Trotter School Improvement Plan.
Update.
Update.
Yes.
Update.
The interim
Update.
update. It's not
Don't
new.
want to saddle
It's
with the
the
whole
update.
deal.
Yes.
They'll make sure we put
I
that in the
appreciate that, thank
polls
you.
update.
Interim.
Yes, up, big capital F.
No need.
Actually, as part of that, are we going to hear about how the new schedule is working out?
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Excellent, good.
Yep.
And then the school choice public hearing and vote.
Mandatory, part of the agenda this time of the month.
And then this
School year.
is on May 11th, but the town elections will have been on May 9th.
Right. So
For all
Roger.
new officers.
Oh, yeah, new officers, and Roger has to make sure you get sworn in.
Yes.
Assuming you
Did
get
you
actually
sworn in.
go to town hall before the meeting and get sworn in again?
I have to go to the town hall before the meeting to get sworn in again.
Yeah, next month.
Email.
I'll try and remember.
Note, send,
Or you just come and you just don't vote on stuff. That's me last year. Right.
Yeah, you're talking about,
When I
you're
forgot.
talking about the May 9th meeting.
May, yeah,
Yeah.
May 11th meeting.
Yeah, I won't have to worry about voting on anything at that meeting.
Off and about.
Yeah.
It'll be,
All right.
you know, we do this on, Wednesday, and they have that meeting on Wednesday. I think it happened to me last year. So I will get sworn in, but I won't be violating any votes.
Okay.
I tried my best last year
Okay.
not to.
Yeah, it took us about, was it 3 times? to get
3
the
times to
minutes
get the
straight?
minutes straight, because I
What
really
was the
didn't want
problem?
anyone to come back and say
No.
that I voted on anything.
That was
And-
3 versions.
And never assume there could be a large write-in vote. So, never count on it.
Anything else for next month?
Yeah, I love the math presentation. If
Yeah, that was great.
next month or the month after, somebody else feels the
Yeah, that was-
need. It's
Oh, the math.
like science or English, but.
That was fantastic.
That was a
Isn't it?
terrific-
That's so good
that
that
was
everyone
terrific.
is-
Yeah, well,
Nice to see
science
all of those
would be
in all the
great,
different
English,
parts.
English language arts.
And Mike suggested the committee as part of our discussions around agendas for next year, that we schedule, just as we do
Right.
the improvement plans, some presentations.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Because I think we'll be equally impressed with the work of our language arts committee and
That's what
also
I was thinking,
science.
language arts and science would be great to hear
We've been,
about.
Yeah, you and I talked briefly about, the items that were on the, on the budget presentation, the items that were not funded, but people are talking about,
Right.
maybe periodic updates on some of those
Absolutely.
as they,
Right, or that earlier in the
baked
year
enough to talk
before we
about it.
really get into budget stuff, it might be good to sort of hear about.
I'm actually thinking that we
Here's the
should,
wish list.
we should kind of rotate them, just
yeah.
Yeah,
for-
it's June.
forever. In other words, between the school improvement plan, then the different areas of the curriculum.
Yeah, that's right.
And just keep that going, because that was very, very good tonight.
And we also this year had a presentation from SEF and PTOs, which I think was great.
Right.
And want to maybe do that
Right.
as an annual event.
Yeah.
Just if for no reason to extend our deepest appreciation for all the work that they do.
Yep.
And they're always excited to talk about the great things that they've done. We could actually, over the summer, maybe map out a strategy of the initiatives that we've talked about, and also presentations from our teachers and the curriculum folks, and sort of present that to the chair.
Greg's taking credit for the whole organization of the presentation tonight, right?
Yeah.
Very well done.
It was a should.
No credit.
Okay.
All right. Audience sharing, once again.
You're gonna surprise us one night, I
We always
know.
get
Keeping us in suspense.
I do have to ask Dave if that was sufficient to cover the charter discussion. I know we were gonna sort of tag team on this. You're fine with that?
All right.
All right,
And I guess I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion for adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
All adjourned.